What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. It is time to give you my upset alert games heading into Week 6 of the 2024 college football season. Before I start this video, if I do sound a little bit funny, my allergies have been bothering me. I am a little bit under the weather. I'm going to try to get through this video as best as I can. Looking back to my upset alert games from last week, we had 4 upsets that, we had in the video from last week. It was a wild weekend, of course, in Week 5. We saw Kentucky upset Ole Miss. That was probably the biggest upset, of course, that we had on the video. Did not really see that one coming. Kansas State upsetting Oklahoma State, even though the Wildcats were favored, but Oklahoma State was the higher-ranked team. Notre Dame upsetted Louisville, even though Notre Dame was the favorite in that game. They were definitely the lower-ranked team, and then also we had Alabama upset Georgia. That was probably the second biggest upset from last weekend, and we missed one from last weekend. We missed Utah, upsetted by Arizona. That could have been on the video. We would have had 5 upsets last week. That would have been probably the most upsets that we've had, throughout the 2 years that we've been doing these upset alert videos, but we have 4 last week. Heading into Week 6, I think we do have a lot of good games coming up this weekend. How this upset alert video works, again, I do 8 games total, 4 games each. Give you the 4 games that are least likely to be upsets, and then 4 games that are most likely to be upsets. And in order for me to call it an upset alert type game, the spread has to be in single digits in order for me to call it an upset alert type game. And also, I just do top 25 matchups and also top 25 versus unranked matchups as well. So that's how the upset alert videos work. Let's go ahead and get right into my 8 games and 4 games each. The games that are least likely to be upsets, and then 4 games that are most likely to be upsets. We'll start with the least likely category. We start here with Auburn and Georgia. This game will be at 3:30 Eastern Time on ABC. Georgia favored by 24 in this one, and the over and under is at 53.5. These are 2 similar teams. How does Georgia bounce back after the loss to Alabama, and how does Auburn bounce back after the loss to Oklahoma? Auburn's kind of been a bit, big disappointment, so far this year. They've kind of really struggled, at the quarterback position. That's kind of been like, for the last 2 years now with Hugh Freeze. But, Auburn fans are definitely not really a big fan of Hugh Freeze after this 2-3 start. I mean, Auburn's had some tough, games this year already. They had to play Cal out of the non-conference, and then, of course, had to play a solid defensive team in Oklahoma. It looked like Auburn was going to win that game, but they did choke in the 4th quarter, so they're heading on the road here against Georgia, one of the toughest places to play in college football. I think Georgia's going to come out really fired up in this one. It's a rivalry game, and also anything can happen. This is one of the oldest SEC rivals in college football history. But again, I think Georgia's going to come out really fired up here. After the loss to Alabama, I feel like they'll definitely be back to where they need to be. And this team will get better and better as the season goes along. But Georgia definitely made a lot of mistakes in that Alabama game. We're not expecting a lot of points to be scored here between these 2 teams. I don't know if Auburn can score a lot of points here on this Georgia defense. I mean, Georgia is favored by 24, so that really does tell me that Georgia is going to win this game by a big margin. But you never know. A rivalry game, Auburn was competitive against Georgia last year, but that game, of course, was in Jordan-Hare. This is probably like a revenge game here for Georgia because they only beat Auburn by 7 last year. But we will see what happens. I don't really think an upset's going to happen, though, here. Again, Georgia and Auburn here, the oldest SEC rivalry in the history of college football, and it will be at 3:30 Eastern Time here on ABC. Next up, we got Iowa versus Ohio State, 3:30 Eastern Time on CBS. The Buckeyes favored by 20.5, and the over and under is at 44.5. So we're kind of not expecting a lot of points to be scored like the Auburn and also the Georgia game. Ohio State's coming off a big win against Michigan State, 38-7. They haven't been really tested yet, except for that Michigan State game. That was kind of like their first kind of real challenge, even though it's on the road. But, Ohio State went out there and they pretty much dominated. We know that Michigan State's not on the level of the Buckeyes. Ohio State, I think we're going to find out how good their offense really is against a really good defensive team in Iowa. The offense, I think we're going to kind of figure that out as well for the Buckeyes. They get this game at home, so I feel like, Ohio State fans will be really fired up for this one. You look at Iowa on the other side, they are coming out of a bye week from last weekend. They beat Minnesota a couple weeks ago. So, yeah, this Iowa team is pretty solid. I don't really think an upset's going to happen, though, because, Ohio State's playing at home. If it was at Iowa, I would say that, Ohio State would be on upset alert, but I just don't really think an upset is going to happen. Ohio State is definitely a more talented team, and I think they're definitely the more better offense and definitely the more better defensive team. But again, Ohio State, the big advantage for them is they got this game at home. So this will be the 3:30 CBS kickoff. Again, it's Iowa versus Ohio State at 3:30 Eastern Time here on CBS. And again, the Buckeyes are favored by 20.5 points. Next up, we got Tennessee versus Arkansas. This game will be at 7:30 Eastern Time on ABC. Tennessee favored by 13.5 points, and the over and under is at 59.5. Tennessee had a bye week this past weekend. They're sitting there at 4-0. A couple weeks ago, they defeated Oklahoma on the road. So this is like back-to-back road game trips here for Tennessee, but they had a bye week in between those back-to-back road games. Tennessee, I think, has a pretty good defense, based off of what's happened in the first 4 games for the Volunteers. They kind of needed that bye week, though, to kind of just recover from that game against Oklahoma a couple weeks ago. That was a very competitive game and also a very physical game. Even though Tennessee pretty much dominated that game, and they also have a very explosive offense. Nico Amaliava's looked pretty good in the first 4 games that he's played. Arkansas, on the other hand, they're coming off a tough loss to Texas A&M. How did they bounce back here? Are they all beat up after that Texas A&M game? It's kind of hard to tell. Sometimes when you play like a really good defensive team, you're kind of all beat up on the offensive side of the football after playing a physical game. So that might be a disadvantage there for Arkansas, but the advantage for them is definitely the home field advantage, even though Tennessee is favored by 13.5 points here on the road. I don't know if I see an upset here happen, but this game can definitely go 2 different ways. You see the over and under is at 59.5. Yeah, it could be a shootout here between 2 really good offensive teams, or it could be a low-scoring type game because Tennessee does have a pretty good defense, but we will see what happens here. Tennessee and Arkansas at 7:30 Eastern Time on ABC. And then the last least likely upset alert game, it's Miami and California, 10:30 Eastern Time on ESPN. Miami favored by 10 points in this one. Miami's coming off a pretty close game against Virginia Tech. Miami's going to have to travel out west here in this one. California's a pretty solid team. They're sitting there at 3-1. This is a pretty solid 3-1 California team. A couple weeks ago, they lost to Florida State. That was kind of a disappointing loss here for the Golden Bears. And this is a team that beat Auburn in week number 2. So, yeah, that was definitely a disappointing loss. I think if Cal would have beaten Florida State, they probably would have been sitting here at 3-0. And they probably would have had a chance here, or actually like 4-0 to be honest, if you count that loss to Florida State. They would have been 4-0, and this would probably be an undefeated matchup here between these 2 teams. College game day is going to be down here for this game, so this is probably the game day of the weekend here. Miami again, they have to go out west. Is that going to affect them here going into this game against Cal? I really don't know. Miami is a very talented team. They had to come back from behind and beat Virginia Tech, and they got really lucky on the Hail Mary as well. So, yeah, we'll kind of find out if Miami is really ready for this kind of test, but that's a very tough place to play. And also, it's at 10:30 Eastern Time, so it's going to be a late-night kickoff. It's going to be a really late game here where I'm at, so I probably won't be able to watch this game. But, Cal, I won't be really shocked here if they pulled off the upset, in my opinion. That's a very tough place to play on the road at California. But we will see what happens. Again, this is my last least likely upset alert game. It's Miami and Cal here at 10:30 Eastern Time on ESPN. Let's now get into the most likely upset alert games for this weekend. We will start here with an SEC game. It's Missouri versus Texas A&M. This game going to be at noon Eastern Time on ABC. Texas A&M favored by 2 points, and the over and under is at 48.5. Texas A&M coming off that very competitive win against Arkansas. That was a very physical game. Do you feel like Texas A&M's a little bit beat up on the offensive side of the football? I really don't know, but their defense played pretty well. Based off of what Texas A&M's done this year, I feel like their defense is really solid. They don't really have an explosive offense. They had to go with a change at quarterback. I don't really know the status of Connor Wingman just yet, as of right now when I did this video. But Texas A&M, they have the home field advantage. It's one of the toughest places to play in all of college football. This crowd is going to be really rocking because Missouri is a top 10 team, and they're 4-0. Missouri hasn't been really tested yet. They've had some easy games to start out the year, except for Boston College and Vanderbilt. Remember, they only beat Vanderbilt by, a couple, or actually like 3 points a couple weeks ago. They had to go to overtime in that game, I believe, and they also had a very tough game against Boston College 3 weeks ago. So, yeah, we're going to find out how good Missouri is and find out if they are a top 10 team for real. But, this is a very tough place to play. I really don't be surprised here. Texas A&M definitely pulls off the upset. Look, I know the Aggies are favored. Texas A&M is on upset alert, but, like I said, I based my upset alert video on who the highest ranked team is. So I think Texas A&M is going to pull off the upset here. Again, this game will be at noon Eastern time here on ABC. Next up, we got SMU versus Louisville. Noon Eastern time as well on ESPN. Louisville favored by 7 points, and the over and under is at 56.5. You look at Louisville coming off that tough loss, to Notre Dame last week. How do they bounce back, after that loss? Are they all beat up as well after playing a really good defensive team in Notre Dame? I really don't know. Louisville's back at home in this one. That definitely kind of gives them some confidence going into this game against SMU. This will not be an easy game here for the Cardinals. I don't know why Louisville is favored by 7 points, to be honest, but SMU has gotten better and better as a team ever since they lost to BYU in week number 3, I believe, or maybe week number 2. I can't remember when that game was. I believe it was back on September 6th. BYU is like 5-0, so that's been a really good loss ever since here for the Mustangs. But ever since that loss, SMU has gotten better and better each and every single game. They beat Florida State, of course, this past weekend. Had to kind of pull away in the second half and everything. So going into this game, I wouldn't be shocked here if SMU pulled off the upset. And if Louisville does lose this game, I think we can probably rank SMU in the top 25 if they beat Louisville here. So watch out for this one. SMU versus Louisville in the ACC. This game at noon Eastern time on ESPN. Next up, we got Ole Miss versus South Carolina. This game will be at 3:30 Eastern time on ESPN. Ole Miss favored by 9 points, and the over and under is at 52.5. How does Ole Miss bounce back? For some reason, Ole Miss only dropped to number 12 in the AP poll, which is not really a lot of spots. To be honest, they only dropped like 6 spots after that loss to Kentucky. Yeah, that doesn't really make any sense. I did drop Ole Miss all the way down to my, in my 20 range, like 21 through 25 in my rankings. I tell you what, Ole Miss, they were tested for the first time, and they did end up getting beat by Kentucky. How do they bounce back here? They're heading to a really tough place to play here. South Carolina is a pretty solid team, a 3-1 team that beat Kentucky in week number 2. They were also very competitive against LSU, in their first game in the SEC. That's been their only loss so far this season. So, yeah, watch out for this one. It's one of the toughest places to play here in the SEC. This is a very tough test here for Ole Miss. And I believe this is their first road game of the season, or maybe their second road game, because they had Wake Forest, but that wasn't really a tough game for the Rebels. This will definitely be their toughest road game up to date so far. So, yeah, this one, watch out for this one. If South Carolina can pull off the upset here, I think we can probably rank South Carolina in the top 25. And also, if they go 4-1 to start out the year, this South Carolina team, I'm telling you, they could be a surprise team the rest of the way. So watch out for this one. It's Ole Miss versus South Carolina, 3:30 Eastern time here on ESPN. And then finally, our most likely upset alert game heading into this weekend. We got Michigan and Washington. This game at 7:30 Eastern time on NBC. How about this, though? Washington favored by 2.5 points. I don't understand that. Michigan is the number 10th ranked team in the AP poll, and also they are ranked in the top 10 and also the top 25 AP poll. Washington is not a bad 3-2 team. They're coming off a tough loss, to Rutgers last week, but they're playing at home in this one. Maybe they were overlooking Rutgers. Maybe they were, focused on this Michigan game. And there's also a lot of storylines that, ever since the preseason, there's been a lot of storylines here in this game. Michigan and Washington met last year in the national championship game. And then also they have, two different rosters and also 2 different coaches. So, yeah, there's a lot of roster turnover here for both of these teams. But I think the game plan for Michigan is definitely going to run the football. Their defense has been pretty solid in the first half of their games, but the second half they have not been really that good on the defensive side of the football, and Michigan has no pass game. Their run game is definitely the strength. So I think Michigan's going to run the football here and try to really waste the clock down and keep that Washington offense off the field. Washington, for them, they get the home field advantage. That's pretty much a big advantage for them as well. But to be honest, I wouldn't be really surprised here if Washington did pull off the upset. Again, that spread does really surprise me a lot, that the Huskies are favored here by 2.5 points. I think the reason why Washington is favored is because of the performances that Michigan's had, in the first 5 games, and also the last 2 games have not been really good finishes for the Wolverines against Minnesota and USC. But watch out for this one. Washington and Michigan, again, a rematch from last year's national championship. It's at 7:30 Eastern time on NBC. And again, Washington favored by 2.5 points. That is my upset alert games heading into week number 6 of the 2024 college football season. Let me guys know what you think about these upset alert games. Who do you see getting upsetted this weekend? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned here for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.